All right, let's talk about one of the biggest ideas in the entire health world, the belief that stress makes you stronger. But what if that idea isn't just a little bit wrong? What if it's a complete deception that's actually holding you back? Today, we're diving into that.
So it really all kicks off with this weird thing you might have even noticed yourself. It's this paradox where the people who are the most obsessed with optimizing their health often end up looking kind of sick.
I mean, just look at the contrast. On one side, you've got the classic biohacker. Their lab work? Perfect. Their HRV, that key metric for recovery? Through the roof. But then you look at their face and you see sunken eyes and a kind of gaunt, stressed out look. And then, on the other side, you've got the Italian grandmother. She's eating her pasta, having a glass of wine, and somehow she's vibrant, happy, and seems to live forever.
It just makes you stop and think, right? What is going on here? How is it possible that the person with all the perfect numbers looks so worn out, while the person just living their life is absolutely thriving? Well, according to the material we're looking at today, the answer to that whole paradox comes down to one single, really powerful and, as it turns out, deeply misunderstood idea: hormesis. This is the theory that's quietly sitting behind almost every extreme health trend we've seen in the last decade. So let's pull back the curtain on this concept. To really understand why it might be failing so many people, we have to look at what it actually is, and, maybe more importantly, where it even came from in the first place.
On the surface, the definition sounds pretty good, doesn't it? It's the whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger idea. You take a little poison, a little bit of stress, and your body is supposed to bounce back even more resilient than before. It basically makes suffering feel productive.
But when you look at the history, things get a little uncomfortable. See, the concept really took off in the 1950s, and it was pushed by industries that had a huge financial interest in convincing people that small doses of their pollution, we're talking radiation, pesticides, industrial chemicals, weren't just harmless, but were actually good for you.
And that is the massive conflict of interest sitting right at the heart of this theory. This wasn't just some pure scientific discovery. It was an incredibly convenient marketing tool, a scientific-sounding excuse for industrial pollution.
And here's the fine print they didn't advertise. This hidden trade-off was everywhere in the original research. So yeah, maybe a tiny dose of a toxin like dioxin reduced cancer in one organ, but that same dose would increase cancer in the liver or the lungs. The body as a whole wasn't getting stronger, the damage was just getting moved around.
So that brings us right to the modern version of this idea, the belief that any and all stress is a good thing we should seek out. But as we're about to see, that whole premise is built on a really shaky foundation.
And to really get why, we have to go back to the source. We've got to talk about the guy who literally wrote the book on stress, a scientist named Hans Selye.
Now, Selye figured out that our bodies go through three very clear stages when we're stressed. There's the initial alarm, then comes resistance, which is the part everyone loves to talk about. That's where our bodies adapt. But they always conveniently forget to mention stage 3, exhaustion. That's the part where your ability to adapt just runs out. Your tank is empty, and systems start to break down.
Here's the key thing to understand. Your body doesn't have a separate gas tank for your workout stress and another for your job stress and another for your diet stress. It's all one tank. That cold plunge you did this morning, it draws from the exact same energy reserve you need to handle a tight deadline at work or a bad night of sleep. When the tank is empty, it's empty for everything.
So let's apply this to some of the really popular biohacks. You're told a cold plunge builds resilience. But what it's really doing, especially over time, is telling your thyroid to slow down to conserve energy. Extended fasting is sold as this magical repair process, but for an already stressed body, that feeling of energy you get, it's not clean energy. It's a high driven by the stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline. And jumping in a sauna right after a hard workout, it can actually get in the way of the signals your body needs from muscle growth.
And the real-world cost of all this chronic stress and restriction is just massive. Just look at the famous Minnesota starvation experiment. It showed that even a moderate, sustained calorie deficit cost a staggering 40% drop in metabolic rate. The body wasn't adapting by getting stronger, it was adapting by shutting down non-essential functions to survive.
Okay, I can hear you thinking it now, but what about autophagy? That's the big one, right? The cellular cleanup process that all this stress is supposed to trigger for our benefit. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, here's the trap. The best way to think about it is with a plant analogy. Imagine you have a healthy, well-watered, well-fed rosebush. If you prune it, you stimulate vigorous new growth. That's autophagy and a high-energy, well-resourced body. It's renewal. But what if you take a withered, drought-stricken, dying plant and start hacking away at it? You're just going to kill it faster. That's autophagy in a low-energy, stressed-out body. It's not repair. It's self-cannibalization.
So, if piling on more and more stress isn't the answer, then what is? Well, the alternative is a total shift in how we think about health. It's about building resilience through support, not through stress.
When you look at it this way, the choice becomes pretty clear. We can keep focusing on all these deliberate stressors that are draining our energy tank, or we can switch our focus to foundational support, things like food and warmth and sleep that actually fill our tank and build real, lasting resilience.
And here's what that actually looks like in practice. It's not about adding more hard things to your to-do list. It's about removing the stressors that are already there, supplying your body with enough fuel and rest, creating an environment where it can actually thrive, and moving in a way that feels good, not punishing.
And you know what? This isn't just a theory. This is exactly what we see in the real world when we look at places like the blue zones, where people live the longest, healthiest lives. Their lives aren't defined by ice baths and fasting. They're defined by community, purpose, good food, and gentle movement. In other words, they are deeply supported.
And we really have to remember this. The celebrity biohackers who are pushing all these extreme protocols, they live in a completely different reality. They have teams of chefs, trainers, and doctors managing every aspect of their recovery. They can afford to take on a huge stress load because they have a massive professional support system in place. Most of us just don't have that luxury.
So, the ultimate takeaway from all of this is a simple but honestly pretty profound shift in perspective. True strength, true health, true resilience, it's built through support, not through suffering. And that really just leaves us with one last question to ask ourselves. In our own pursuit of health, is it possible that we're accidentally stressing a system that is just desperately crying out for support?